Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more new patients so you can grow the way that you want, but you can't grow if you don't have the right data, especially as you expand to more doctors and more locations. And today, prepare to have your brain absolutely blown. We have Steve Jensen, who's the VP of Biz Dev over at Dental Intel, and he's going to drop some knowledge and some numbers on you that I promise you that you don't have access to. These are things that he's benchmarking across the industry for thousands of practices and comparing 2022 to 2023. You need to see this information if you want to grow next year, and you need to start tracking these things. Stay tuned.
In order to grow any business, you have to understand like this basic level of numbers.
Gary comes in, he needs $10,000 of treatment. I'm not going to talk to him about all $10,000 of treatment because he just came in for this tooth pain. And so I'm only going to talk to him about the tooth pain, ask him if he wants to talk about the other stuff that I said. I go, no, not right now. I just want to take care of the tooth. How does that like break down? Are you kind of just rolling that up because it's like, oh, it's over a year, so you should get to all the treatment over the year?
Let's do this daily. And if you'll just do that every day, then your pre-appointment percentage will increase, your retention will improve from a simple daily task. Like, it's not complicated.
All right. I get to do awesome stuff all the time. And I love my life. I love my job. And one of the things that I get to do that makes my job so awesome is I get to talk to awesome people who do awesome things. And I have Steve Jensen here. He is going to share some numbers that are going to blow your mind today. We've already started to touch on them a little bit, but we haven't dived into them yet. So let's just start here, Steve. You guys work with over 10,000 offices. What are you seeing that's like helping offices grow right now?
Yeah, that's great. I think the first thing I'll highlight, thank you. The first thing I'll highlight is in order to grow any business, you have to understand like this basic level of numbers, like what's going on in the business. So I'm going to share, I think it'd be cool to share, the industry stats. I think it'd be cool to share some industry stats, and I'll highlight a few of these movements. I'll even add like a layer of 2021 because I've got like this cool dashboard where I can see all this live. So
that's so cool.
I thought it'd be cool to highlight what's going on in the industry, some like key trends that are impacting businesses. So the first one I'm going to highlight is not on here on the way you would think, but it's the very first line. So pre-appointment percentage, you can see the average practice has fewer patients pre-appointed. All that number means is what percentage of your active patients have a next scheduled visit.
Ooh.
That pre-appointment number has a lot to do with retention. And there's a lot of things that feed into that, like when someone came in for hygiene, did we schedule them in the future? When a new patient comes in, did we schedule them in the future? When someone cancels, did we get them rescheduled? When someone no-shows, did they move it? So the biggest question for that one is,
another way to think through this is when the patient didn't accept treatment, did they schedule again, right? That's a big one that I think so many doctors miss, that you're just bleeding treatment every single month out of the office. And what I noticed, the first thing when I looked at these numbers, and I would love your thoughts on this. So you see let's just look at the 2023 there. So you see the top 10%, they're at 75%, which means 75% of the patients that are coming in have already scheduled their next appointment, while the bottom 10% are only at 30. And something I noticed during COVID, all of our clients crushed. Our company grew, our clients all grew. So I thought everybody was in the dental industry was growing, but what I realized was, no, it was just the top 10% of the dental industry that was growing. The middle shrunk a little bit and the bottom took a beating. Are you kind of seeing that across the board? Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but I want to make sure that you're going to DICOMA 2024. It's July 10th through the 12th. And guess what? We are going to be speaking on the main stage, and we're going to be hosting a boot camp as well. And we want to give away some free tickets. So how do you win these free tickets? You go to smcnational.com. Again, that's smcnational.com. Click the little bar that says enter to win free tickets to DICOMA, and then you submit your information, and everybody's a winner. We're going to be giving a discount to everybody who enters, and we're going to be giving away some free tickets to the conference itself and to the boot camp. Make sure you sign up for these right away. Back to the show.
Yes. In fact, COVID created this chasm where like the practices who were already doing well through COVID did better than they ever have done. And the practices who were struggling struggled more than they ever have struggled. And it created this like bigger gap between these top and bottom. Yeah, I've seen the exact same thing. So one of the questions becomes, and I think this is important. So Steve, of all the different factors that play into some of these reappointment or patient growth rate decline, like why are we not growing? And the biggest thing that's happening from a trend perspective is that cancellations and no-shows have been increasing for 3 years, and we're not solving that problem. And that might, Gary, you're smiling. You might have some other ideas where you're like, dude, there's other stuff too, but that is the biggest one. So cancellations and no-shows, for context, pre-COVID, the average practice would have 6 to 8% of their appointments cancel or no-show. At the end of 2023, the average practice had between 12 and 14% of their appointments cancel or no-show. So it's literally doubled what it was before. And that has a huge impact on what we produce every single day. It has a huge impact on patient retention, on the amount of teamwork and effort and manual labor it takes to get someone scheduled that fell through the cracks. So
that's crazy.
So that's
when I look
problem.
When I look at this, is like the top 10% in 2023 reappointment rate, 75%. For new patients, they're at 70%. But then when you look at the bottom 10%, the reappointment rate is 30, and then it's half of that for new patients. So what that tells me is they cannot keep new patients. And I'm a marketing company, right? So it's marketing's fault. And it's like, nah, bro, you can't even reappoint your existing patients either.
Existing patients.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's crazy.
There's one problem I think that's worth highlighting. I thought it'd be fun to highlight a couple of them that are going on. Okay. So I started at the top. Let's jump. Well, I don't know if you want to hit solves, but I thought it'd be fun just to hit some numbers. So let's jump to the bottom. Treatment dollar acceptance percentage. So the very bottom one. That one in the average and bottom practices declined, in the top practices got better. So let's talk about that number. What that number means is, hey, of all the dollars of dentistry that got presented, what percentage of those dollars actually ends up getting scheduled or completed in the next 12 months? So we give you time to complete this. This isn't an immediate one. So this number, the treatment dollar acceptance, has been on the decline for the last 4 years, actually. Well, 3.5, kind of out of COVID, close to 4. Patients are saying less as a percentage of the dollars. And same thing with another number that doctors like to look at that's not on here is patient case acceptance. So are they saying yes to something? That has also been on the decline.
So real quick on the treatment dollar acceptance percentage, the first question I had around that when I saw this was, how do you guys track that? Because I know every office and every doctor does this differently, even in the same organizations or even in the same building.
Yes.
I've seen where they're like, okay, this patient, Gary comes in, he needs $10,000 of treatment. I'm not going to talk to him about all $10,000 of treatment because he just came in for this tooth pain. And so I'm only going to talk to him about the tooth pain, ask him if he wants to talk about the other stuff that I said. I go, no, not right now. I just want to take care of the tooth. How does that break down? Are you kind of just rolling that up because it's it's over a year, so you should get to all the treatment over the year?
Correct. Yeah. So anything added to the treatment plan, and then we just follow that along for a year to see what gets completed. And just for context too, realistically, a lot of folks think if maybe I presented a $10,000 treatment plan and I get a couple of MOs scheduled. I get a couple of fillings scheduled, and they're going to go and say yes to the rest as long as I do a good job on these. The average practice, on the day you present treatment, whatever gets accepted on that day represents 85% of the treatment plan that's actually going to get completed. So the average practice, whatever gets scheduled or completed on that same day,
that's all.
Only gets an extra 15% completed over the next 12 months. Does that make sense? So
So whatever you get today, today, that's basically it. You're going to get a little bit later.
Correct.
Yeah.
Marginal improvement later. Where most people have this false belief that patients are going to work through this case over time. But if you don't schedule it all on the day you diagnose, then on average, only 15% more of that case actually is completed.
So I was taught when I first came into the dental industry, I was taught this principle called 100% case acceptance. And basically the idea was this: if you keep reappointing your patients in hygiene, you will eventually get 100% of the treatment. It's just a matter of time. If every 6 months I'm coming back.
Correct.
So is a leading indicator to me getting that treatment just as simple as, did I come to my hygiene appointment? And did I even more leading? Did I schedule a hygiene appointment? Is that how you look at it?
Yeah. In fact, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but you'll freaking love this. So a few months ago, I was interested to know, hey, intuitively, I've always shared new patients are the least likely to say yes to treatment and least likely to schedule the next appointment. You haven't built that relationship yet. So my intuitive belief was, if I go isolate practices who have massive growth, so they grow by 50%, 1,000 new patients, they go to 1,500 in a year, or they have 1,000 patients and they go to 2,000 in a year, that a lot of those patient retention, case acceptance numbers are going to be negatively impacted. So I finally did this study a couple months ago, and that's exactly what happens. So it's interesting because now you can buck that trend if you understand that that's what happens if you don't pay attention. Because as you can see in the benchmarks, there are practices who with new patients, they get them to reappoint at a high level. And there are practices who get new patients to say yes to treatment, right? Like that is possible. But you have to be able to like understand that the experience is different from them. And building up to that ask is different than with someone who's come in 2, 3, 4 times and you built a relationship, right?
Yeah. So I've actually seen this trend in real life where an office will have like 40 new patients a month. And it's like, okay, let's ratchet this bad boy up. And we go to 60 and everybody's winning. ROI is great. We're tracking it through ROI and everything's great. And then all of a sudden we go to like 70 and then everything just falls apart. And so there's this like time threshold in offices that the doctors or the hygienists start to move too fast through the patients. And what ends up happening is it's very confusing to the offices because they fill the patients that aren't giving them friction, and especially the new patients, which is typically their patient referrals or their doctor referrals, because the trust has already been built by someone else. But then the marketing patients, which is the one they're paying for, there's no trust there yet. Like they only researched you for like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And so now they're coming into this office and you're like, okay, you want to just do this treatment? Okay, next patient. And it's like, there's this threshold where all of a sudden it just drops off. And it's exactly what you're talking about. If you're not paying attention and watching that, and I don't mean like retroactively, like, oh, well, look at it. Let's look at last month. It's like, no. You have to actually look at it in that week, in that day, and watch as it's rolling. Otherwise, you'll feel super busy, but you don't grow. And I call this like the glass ceiling effect that dentists have, where it's like our retention's high, our new patients are high, but we're not growing. What's going on?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And that just shows through in the research I just did. So I want to add one more layer to this. So there's this for case acceptance, since we're kind of talking about that. The third from the bottom number says average restorative presented per exam. If you notice, that actually for both the bottom and the average practices went up. And the average practice has been presenting more treatment on average year over year for the last 3.5 years. So they are presenting more. So I just want to call this out too. There is a complex relationship between how much treatment I present and treatment case acceptance. Does that make sense? In general, I think this is intuitive to people. Like, hey, if I ratchet that up big time and say, like, on average, I'm presenting like $5,000 of treatment, I'm taking big at bats, then my treatment dollar acceptance or my case acceptance is naturally going to come down.
It's like trying to hit a home run every time you go to the plate. Your batting average is going to go lower, but you're going to get more runs as long as you're hitting the home runs, right?
Exactly. So I just want to reconcile kind of the difference between that line. Average restorative is going up, case acceptance is coming down. So you could just write it off and say, like it kind of evens out. But there's one more number that's not on here to like give a little more context that I like to look at. It's called annual patient value. So it's basically like, hey, it's all of your collections divided by your active patients. But I like the number because it's, hey, if we add a new patient into this business, what will it yield over 12 months, right? And that number has come down. So we are presenting more, case acceptance has come down, but it's not quite making up for the difference. So that is a situation where I want practices to pay attention to say, hey, like, let me really think through what I'm doing. Typically, we're presenting more in hopes that we're going to increase production per visit, which means, I can maybe scale back working days. I can produce more with fewer patient volume, which is a great way to operate. But that's only good if it actually plays out in truth, right? So, so let's say
that's tough. That's tough on the offices, right? Because they're like, I can already think the audience right now, their wheels are turning. Like, how do I do that? How do I even begin to do that? Number one, you got to have dental intel to be able to even track this stuff, right? Because if you're doing spreadsheets, you don't have this data. I can just tell you that right out of the box. It's too complicated for a spreadsheet. Like maybe you could do it if you had like an army of like 10 guys working on the spreadsheet all the time. Maybe then you could do it. But so you got to have a way to track it. But then like, how do I, so dentists, this is very common for dentists, where they just become paralyzed by the numbers. It's like, okay, great, Gary, you just dropped all this knowledge on me. So like, let's just do this. Let's back out a little bit. Like if I came to you right now and I was a dentist and I'm like, cool, love all those numbers. Like, what do I actually do with all of this now? What would you tell me to do if I asked you that question? Yeah.
And that's the perfect question, because you can look at data until you're blue in the face, but unless you actually like take action, then it's pointless. Like it's a waste of your time. And I maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm a senior leader at this
Dental Intel.
software company that sells dental intelligence, like the platform. But it's true. Like,
it is true, yeah.
I think so many of us have wasted time looking at stuff where in retrospect, we're like, man, I shouldn't have spent so much time on that. Like, it didn't materially change anything. So that's the perfect question is like, hey, what do I do? The way I like to approach data and that we do as a company is we like to say, hey, if we can make bite-sized changes or improvements every single day, they will compound over time to the benefit of the business and the benefit of the patient. I'll give you two examples, one about patient retention and this kind of cancellation no-show problem, and one example on case acceptance, okay? So a patient retention example, if you come into the business and this is something we identify, it's called our morning huddle, and we just show, hey, you've got 20 patients coming in. We go scan your whole database and say, hey, on those 20 patients, we want to end the day. Here's the concept. We want to end the day with more patients scheduled than we started with. And then our retention will improve. Does that make sense? Like if today I have 20 scheduled, then I want to end the day with 25 scheduled in the future. And then my total number of patients unscheduled is slowly going to shrink if I do that every single day. So what we do is we just show you, hey, like of the 20 patients coming in, there's an extra 7 family members from that guarantor unit that also aren't scheduled. So while someone's there in person, take the at bat. Let's see if we can't get those folks scheduled their future too while we've got someone from the guarantor unit there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're going to highlight little things like that within the data to make sure that it's broken down to this bite size, like let's do this daily. And if you'll just do that every day, then your pre-appointment percentage will increase, your retention will improve from a simple daily task. Like it's not complicated.
Yeah.
But you need to like watch and make sure like
you have to work
measuring, yes, did we end today with more people scheduled than we started with? If you don't have a way to measure it, then it's not going to work. So there's like one example. And then case acceptance, that's one where people are always looking for the magic bullet. Like, Steve, what do the top 10% of doctors say to the patient and it gets them like a 50% lift in case acceptance? Like that's not what I'm going to share. With case acceptance, I have found first and foremost, when performance is measured, performance improves.
Yeah. If you can't measure it, you can't make improvement to it. 100%.
Manage it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I have found with both doctors and hygienists, just by simply, if you're not measuring the case effectiveness workflow, and I'll just call that our diagnostic percentage. So we want to have consistency. Like we're diagnosing consistently across our patients from a percentage standpoint. So our diagnostic percentage, so we're taking an at-bat at presenting treatment. Then the next one is on average, how much are we presenting? And then our case acceptance, that third one. On the dollars we're presenting, how much are we getting accepted? If you'll track those 3 simple numbers, I guarantee that you will start to improve.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. And it will be probably a marginal improvement.
Do you have a number on patient finance? People using because here's the thing I learned about patient financing. Almost everybody in the dental industry uses it to save the deal rather than drive the deal. Do you guys have any data around that?
I don't have like clear data, but I'll share this. We have I'm cool with all of them. I love Care Credit and some, but we did a relationship with WiseTac is the one that's like integrated. They're all great. And what we noticed as we're seeing this processing volume is exactly what you're saying. We expected as we like taught folks, hey, like if you use financing, it can get you to yes more than if you don't. And you're right. The volume that we're seeing come through is only on these big cases where they clearly weren't able to get them to say yes to a cash option. And so now they're presenting as like a last ditch effort. So that 100% that's the case.
It's so amazing.
Based on the volume we see of how often it gets presented.
So these are normally 15 minutes. We've already blown by that, but obviously this is like so valuable. And we didn't even get to like 3% of all of this information, right?
For sure.
So Steve, I'm going to ask you this on recording because it's easier to get a yes. Could I schedule an hour podcast with you and literally just pick your brain on all of these numbers? And also, I want to go over your scorecards. I think your guys' scorecards are absolutely revolutionary. And right now, if doctors are listening, like how do they, if they go, dude, I want all this, how do they reach out to you? How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, that's great. Best way, just go to dentalintel.com. One of the things I'll just show to you here, yes, let's do an hour. Let's dive into this stuff. And two, I'll just tell folks, like if you're looking at these benchmarks and you want to know, hey, like how do I compare? We'll do that free. Like if you're not a customer, we'll just do that. So we'll install Dental Intel. It takes like 5 minutes, and then we'll pull this report with your actual numbers in there. So then you can decide like, hey, like I want to take some action. And if you become a customer, great. If you don't, great. Like we want to give value to the industry. And that's something I would say is definitely worth your time as you're looking at these benchmarks, thinking, okay, how am I doing versus the industry? At least get a peek under the hood and see like, hey, how am How am I doing?
Guys, if you don't do that, if you don't have dental intel and you don't do that, you are stupid. You are stupid and not smart people. Steve can't say that, but I can say that.
I can't say that.
that is crazy. 5 minutes, benchmarks. And then if you decide, hey, I can't, there's things I can't improve about this. There's nothing I can do about this. Then don't buy the software. Like, it doesn't cost you anything. So absolutely,
exactly.
guys, you got to have this. Steve, thank you so much for coming on. And I realize now, like, after just listening to you, I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to block off 90 minutes and we're going to like do an hour-long podcast. I don't normally do that, but this is so valuable. And I don't think that people have access to this information. Like, it's not something you can just Google. I know you guys talk about it all the time, but it's not something you just go to YouTube and just find, right? Like, it's very isolated information that's super, super valuable. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for being willing to come on a longer show and talk through this stuff.
Dude, I'm a freaking nerd for this stuff. So bring it on,
That's so cool. Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It's been awesome.